right, guys, we're on to our next herbal term. So we have now moved to nervines, which I get a little excited about nervines. I'm growing a bunch of them this year. So if you spent any time in herbal circles, you'll hear people say things like, that's a great nervine, or you might read it in books. It says great nervine. And maybe you're like, all right, I think I know what that is, right? Nervine, nervous system. Okay, I got it. But what exactly is a nervine? And can a plant really support something as complicated as the human nervous system? So let's dig into that word a little bit more. And again, we're just skirting these words. There's a lot to really understand about them, but we're just doing the cliff notes. So let's go back and let's all play a game right quick. We're going to all imagine that we're living about 500 years ago, right? There's no televisions, there's no cell phones, there's no emails, no social media. So you're not watching this video right now. We don't care what the Joneses are doing. We're not trying to keep up with them. There's no notifications going off every 5 minutes. Sounds really nice, doesn't it? It's all peaceful, quiet as it is out here too. Except it really wasn't peaceful to the people then. People still worried. They grieved probably a lot more than we do now, right? A lot more death and stuff. They still lost, loved ones. Infant mortality was a little bit higher because of things, right? They laid at night worrying about things, and they carried stressors just like we do today. Human beings have always been human beings, and they'll continue to be human beings. Just the details change, but our nervous system does not. And herbalists noticed this long before they understood the neurotransmitters and cortisol and the science that we talk about today. I don't know if you heard the goose, but I don't think she likes my video. So one of the biggest misconceptions I see is that people that think that nervines are just simply an herb that make you sleepy, right? But that's not actually true. Some nervines may help promote relaxation. Some are traditionally used before bed, but the term nervine is, as you'll find out, much broader than that. A nervine is simply an herb traditionally used to support the nervous system. That's it. Very simple definition, right? The interesting part comes when we look at how different nervines work. So in that capacity, think of the nervous system like this busy superhighway, right? It is constantly receiving messages and moving them around, right? Information is constantly being sent, and your brain is processing everything around you, right? I mean, faster than I can snap my fingers, of course. It's processing your emotions, your environment, your memories, right? Sometimes those memories will pop up and get us too. It's processing your stress, and your body is doing an incredible amount of work every second of every day. So herbalists recognize that some plants seemed particularly supportive of that system and those stressors. And those plants became known as nervines. So now here's where things can get a little interesting. Not all nervines are alike. In fact, herbalists often think about nervines in different categories. So now we're getting categories into categories, right? So some nervines are relaxing. Some are nourishing. Some are uplifting. And some are restorative. And, saying all nervines are alike is like saying all fruits are alike, right? So you bite into an apple and you bite into a lemon. Well, you're going to get very different responses from that first bite. So it's the same with nervines, right? You take one nervine and use another nervine, you might get different responses. So we've actually already done a video on one of the most famous nervines, and that's lemon balm, or Melissa officinalis. And we know that Melissa is the Greek word for honeybee, and Bees absolutely love it, as we talked about, and lemon balm has constantly been associated with that uplifting spirit, and you just makes you all over happy and glad just to be around it. And do the bees look sleepy? I mean, they don't really look sleepy. The one over there doesn't look sleepy at all. So I think that's telling us something very important, right? People have been turning to this plant since the beginning of time for difficult seasons for different reasons. Another famous nervine is chamomile. I know that I have personally drank that, what is that, sleepy time tea or something like that. And chamomile is a great example of how herbs often do more than one thing. People often know chamomile, right, as that bedtime tea that I talked about, but herbalists have used chamomile for digestion, tension. It's used with children's emotional support and general nervous system comfort. One reason chamomile became so beloved is because of its gentle factors, right? And it's one of those herbs that seems to make its way into a lot of herbal traditions because of that. Another fun one is Skullcap. I mean, just personally, because I like saying that name. And Skullcap is one of the coolest stories in herbalism. People hear the name and assume that has something to do with the brain and the skull. But actually, it's just because the flowers look like little medieval helmets, right? So that's where the name came from. Herbalists often think of Skullcap when discussing the busy mind. So maybe that's where the little helmet comes from, right? The busy mind. So, those nights when you're telling your body, like, super, super tired and I've got to go to bed, and your body's like, no. Remember that awkward conversation you had with Vanessa in high school in 1997? Tonight's the night we're going to decompress that. So usually that's where Skullcap enters into the conversation to help us in those times. Another fun one is Oatstraw. I'm growing that one this year. Super excited about that one. And Oatstraw is fascinating because it's not really considered a quick fix herb. It's often thought of as a nourishing herb, an herb that will shine over time as you use it. So when herbalists talk about nourishing nervines, that's fun. Oatstraw is usually at the top of that list. And I love that because it reminds us that not every herb has that immediate result. Remember, some things are built over time and consistency, and the body just gradually going, oh, I can depend on this, right? So this brings us to one of my favorite questions, right? Is this short-term or long-term? So the answer with nervines is often both. Chamomile tea before bed, sure. If you do it once in a while, that's a short-term use. If you do it every night, well, then that's a long-term use. And how about a cup of lemon balm, right? Because you had a really stressful work week, but next week's not so stressful, right? So that would be a short-term use of it. But herbs like Oatstraw, right? When you talk about using Oatstraw, you're usually talking about using it for weeks or even months. So nervines are in that category that can live in both worlds of short-term and long-term use, depending on the specific herb you're using. One thing I think that modern culture gets wrong is that we often assume that supporting ourselves means that we have to have something dramatic, right? Right now, I'm going to buy the fanciest gadget and I'm going to follow this trend and I'm going to get this quick fix and everything's going to be better tomorrow. But herbal traditions often point us towards a simpler thing, right? We're going to make a tea where our body decompresses. We're going to take a walk to help with our stress, right? We're going to rest. We're going to breathe. And we're going to create a routine. And that's one of the reasons why nervines have remained so relevant for so long, is they kind of just fit into the body's natural daily life. So another interesting fact is that in the modern era, before the modern era came along, a lot of monasteries actually in households, right, would grow these nervine herbs all around. And it's not because, you know, the monks were doctors and treating everybody with anxiety disorders, or none of them had any experience with neuroscience or anything like that. It's just because people watched, right? And they observed plants. And generation after generation, they just noticed certain herbs seemed worth keeping close to them. It was very beneficial, right? That's how, you know, a lot of things became around humans a lot, right? We noticed the benefits of them. And that old wisdom always kind of fascinates me. And I think it's time we start to bring it back, right? And say, you know, we're not going to forget what we used to know. We're going to try to bring it back. So a nervine, you know, if you're going to remember one thing from today, right? A nervine is not a sleepy time herb. A nervine is something that is used to support our nervous system with subcategories depending on the herbs, right? Some relax, some nourish, some uplift, and if you're fortunate, some will do all three. So once you understand that, right, and the nervines start to make connections, and again, as you're reading the specific herbs and you see all these categories underneath, now you're going to start to understand more about what exactly they're meaning. So leave me a comment below. What is your favorite nervine tea? What's your go-to? I've had a really stressful week, or, you know, we're really going to break down Vanessa's conversation in 1997, right? What are we reaching for here, guys? So leave it in the comments below. And I'm going to work on our next herbal term. I hope to get a lot of these done, so they can just kind of roll out, and we keep building on this before we circle back to the more specific herbs. And then when I talk about these terms, you're going to be like, yep, I'm getting it, right? So until next time, guys, stay rooted, always stay curious, and keep growing in grace. Bye, guys.